This week, five seemingly unrelated events happened around the world: a major AI acquisition, a massive missile defense contract, a shipping crisis affecting 125 billion worth of global trade, a landmark environmental settlement, and a court filing raising questions about corporate influence in Washington. At first glance, you will see that these stories have nothing in common, but stay till the end. In the end, we will reveal something much bigger: how these stories are connected. So, the world is entering an era where technology, security, supply chains, regulation, and political influence are becoming the new battlegrounds of economic power. So, now let's break it down. Moving on to the first story, Qualcomm announced that it is acquiring AI software company Modular in a deal worth roughly $3.9 billion. So, why Qualcomm has decided now only? Because for years, NVIDIA has dominated AI infrastructure through both hardware and software. And one of the NVIDIA's biggest advantages is CUDA, the software ecosystem developers use to build AI applications. And Modular was founded by the former Apple and Google engineers and developed AI software tools designing to run across different hardware platforms, potentially reducing the dependence on NVIDIA ecosystem. So why you should care? Because the AI race is no longer just about building bigger chips, it is becoming a battle over who controls the software layer developers use to create AI products and who will win in this. Qualcomm giants a stronger position in AI infrastructure and data center computing. Developers may gain more alternatives to NVIDIA ecosystem, and who will lose potentially NVIDIA's long-term dominance if competitors successfully build viable alternatives. So what will happen next? Watch You should watch whether Qualcomm can attract developers and cloud providers, because acquiring technology is one thing and building an ecosystem is much harder. So while companies are spending billions to compete in AI, governments are spending even larger sums preparing for a very different challenge: security. So moving on, so the second story is Lockwood Martin received a contract worth more than $35 billion to expand production of THAAD missile defense interceptors over the coming years. THAAD is designed to shoot down ballistic missiles before they reach their targets. So why now? Because the world has become significantly less stable, and conflicts in the Middle East, tensions involving in Iran, concerns about North Korea, and growing competition between major powers have pushed missile defense higher on the national security agendas. So why you should care about this? Because defense spending often reflects what governments believe future risks should look like. And right now, governments are signaling that missile threats are becoming a bigger concern. So, who will win in this? The Lockwood Martin defense suppliers, countries seeking stronger missile defense capabilities will win. And who loses? Taxpayers ultimately fund these programs, and rising military spending can divert resources from other priorities. So, what will happen next? Expect more defense spending announcements globally as countries will seek to strengthen their deterrence and security. And the reason security matters so much becomes obvious when we look at what's happening to the global trade. According to Allianz, roughly $125 billion worth of ship cargo remains stranded around the Persian Gulf region. More than 1,000 vessels and tens of thousands of seafarers have been affected by disruption linked to instability around the Strait of Hormuz. Why now? Because the Strait of Hormuz remains one of the most important shipping choke points in the world, and a significant portion of global oil and energy supplies move through this corridor. Now, when security risk increases, shipping will slow down and insurance costs will rise, and companies become more cautious. So, why you should care? Because supply chains affect everyone. Shipping disruptions can increase transportation costs and raises energy prices and eventually contribute to the inflation. So, who will win in all this? Insurance providers may benefit from higher premiums, and alternative trade routes become more valuable. And who will lose? Shipping companies, importers, manufacturers, and consumers will lose. So, what will happen next? Next, you will see that even if tensions ease, companies are likely to continue building more resilient supply chains because geopolitical risk is becoming a permanent business consideration. But governments are only focusing on military and trade risks. They are also becoming more aggressive about environmental liabilities. So, the chemical manufacture Chemours agreed to a $450 million settlement with the US authorities over PFAS contamination, often called forever chemicals. These chemicals are used in industrial processes and consumer products because they resist water, grease, and stains. So the problem is they can persist in the environment for extremely longer periods. So why now? Because regulators worldwide are increasing sec- scrutiny of PFAS because of growing concerns about health and environmental impacts. So why you should care? Because this shows that environmental liabilities are becoming major financial risk for corporations. What once looked like a routine industrial activity can later become a multi-$100 million legal problem. So who will win all of this? Communities receiving cleanup funding and water treatment investments, and regulators seeking stronger enforcement. Who will lose? Chemours shareholders absorb significant cost, and companies with unresolved environmental liabilities face increased scrutiny. So, what happens next? Expect more litigation, stricter environmental oversight, and greater pressure on manufacturers using PFAS related technologies. And while some companies face regulatory pressures, another story this week raised questions about how much influence larger corporations may have inside government itself. So the court filings revealed that President Trump spoke with Live Nation CEO Michael Rapino before the Justice Department settled an antitrust case involving Live Nation and Ticketmaster. The company says no substantive settlement terms were discussed. However, the disclosure has generated scrutiny because the conversation occurred before a major government decision. Why now? Because the governments around the world are increasingly examining the power of dominant corporations. Live Nation and Ticketmaster have long faced criticism over ticket prices and market power. Why you should care? Because this isn't really about concerts, it's about trust. People want confidence that major regulatory decisions are being made independently and fairly. Who will win? Live Nation avoided a potentially more aggressive outcome. And who loses? Public confidence can suffer whenever questions arise about political influence and regulatory processes. So, what happens next? The broader debate over antitrust enforcement, corporate power, and government oversight is unlikely to disappear anytime soon. So, if there is one pattern connecting all five stories, it's this: power is being reorganized. In the technology, companies are fighting for control of the AI ecosystem. In defense, governments are preparing for a less stable world. And in trade, geopolitical risks are reshaping supply chains. In regulation, environmental liabilities are becoming more expensive. And in politics, the relationship between corporations and governments is facing greater scrutiny. So the old assumption that economic growth alone drives the world is becoming outdated. And increasingly, the biggest forces shaping businesses are scrutiny, security, technology, regulation, and influence. And the companies and the countries that adapt to this new reality will likely define the next decade. And that's the real story behind this week headlines. What do you think is the biggest force shaping the future right now? AI, geopolitics, regulation, or corporate power? Let me know in the comments.